Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be focusing on creating new crafted items for various professions in World of Warcraft. The example we'll be using is an attack power flask, something that didn't exist in vanilla, and probably for good reason. First things first, we're going to go ahead and use the Burning Crusade flask as sort of a baseline. If you remember, Flask of Supreme Power originally had 150 spell power. Flask of the Titans actually increased players' maximum health by 1200 originally. I've gone ahead and restored them to their original values and modified existing flasks as a result. But the flask that we're going to be creating is not going to be quite as powerful as these. I feel like physical damage dealers are already in a pretty good spot in the Wrath client, and they really don't need that big of a boost. In TBC, the flask was Relentless Assault, which increased your attack power by 120, and in Wrath of the Lich King, it was 180 attack power. I'm just going to go ahead and go with 100 attack power. It strikes the right balance of being overpowered like the original flasks, but doesn't overshadow the other flasks from later expansions. For this video, you'll be needing a couple of tools. You'll of course be needing HeidiSQL, you'll be needing WDBX editor, you'll be needing Lattice MPQ editor. To make your life easier, if possible, you'll also need spell editor, unless of course you're on a Mango server, in which case you'll just have to do things by hand with WDBX editor. So let's get started. First thing first, we're going to work on spells. So go ahead and pull up your spell editor. We're going to go ahead and look for an existing spell that has a lot of the effects that we need and copy from there. So let's do Flask of Supreme Power. We're just going to go ahead and copy this entry by clicking on New Spell. I'm going to enter that entry, 17628. Hit OK. I created a new non-existing entry. I like to put 8s in front of things, make things sufficiently large numbers, otherwise there's the potential for it to be overwritten. Then of course we're going to make adjustments to the spell to suit our needs. So first thing first, we're going to change the name. This is actually the name of the aura that the player gets whenever they consume a Supreme Power Flask. We're just going to go ahead and rename this Battle Prowess. So Flask of Battle Prowess is what I'm going to go with. I'm just going to modify this to say Attack Power. $symbol S and 1 just indicates that it takes values from this first base point from spell effects 1. And then of course we're going to go ahead and modify the spell description as well. Go ahead and hit save changes, go into your effects, set base points to 99 to change it to 100 attack power, set die sides to 1 so that you don't get variable attack power. If you wanted to have 100 to 110 attack power and have it be random each time, that's how you would do it. Have it target the unit caster, which is yourself. If you don't know what aura you need, you can go ahead and just look up Flask of Relentless Assault. It'll tell you what you need, which is 99 attack power. So this trigger spell right here may or may not be important, but every flask seems to have this, and this is just a pointer to the create item spell. We're just going to zero it out for now and come back to this later. Once those changes are made, just make sure you go ahead and hit save. This misc value is no longer important, so just go ahead and zero that out. The second aura we also want to zero out. This was essentially to make sure that both spell damage and healing were modified in the original spell, but of course we don't care about that now. Just go ahead and check spell effects 3. And then finally, if you want to, you can go ahead and choose a new icon. So I actually have extended icons. I'd be more than happy to show you guys how to do that in a later video, but for now just find an icon that you like and we'll go from there. I'm just going to go ahead and see what Flask's results show. And maybe look up potions. I could also look up alchemy if I really want to. That may also show some results. If you wanted to, you could also create your own custom BLP file, modify the colors here, and then convert it back to BLP. But again, that's something I'd probably show in another video. Go ahead and select this red one as my icon. Now we're going to create our create item spell. Again, we're just going to go with Flask of Supreme Power. Copy an existing record, 17637, which is the create spell. 817637 for an unused ID. We have our new Flask creating spell. Just go ahead and rename this. Hit save. Go to effects, and we're just going to go over base real quick. So casting time, Go ahead and modify that if you'd like, for a shorter casting time if you wanted. Requires spell focus. You could leave blank if you wanted to, so that you actually don't need an alchemy lab to create said item. But I like to be consistent with vanilla, so I'm going to go ahead and keep it there. Double check everything here to make sure it's all the values that you want. Hit save. And then we're going to go into spell effects 1. We actually don't have our item yet, but I know which ID I'm going to be using. This item type just means the item entry. Check that spell effects 2 and 3 don't have any existing entries. Copy this number, go back to our other spell, and then go ahead and paste it into the trigger spell. Then we're going to go back to our creation spell. Just go ahead and click on items, and these are the reagents for said flask in order to create it. So this, if you open up your favorite Wrath of the Lich King database or whatever, you go look for items, just choose a random item, paste that item entry in here, and you'll see that it's 30 dream foil. This number here is stone scale oil. This is for Black Lotus, and this is the vial. I'm actually just going to go ahead and keep these entries the same. And in this case, I'm not going to create a new icon because you're never going to see this icon anyway. Go ahead and hit Save Changes. We're then going to export our changes either to a local MPQ or DBC files. I'm just going to do DBC files because I already have an MPQ that I'll just slap this into. Make sure that spell is checked. Hit Export Checked Files to DBC files. While that's processing, we're going to go ahead and create our items. So first item is going to be Flask of Supreme Power. Just go ahead and right click, duplicate row with keys, and put in the item entry that you chose. I am going to come back and change this display ID. We just have to modify a few things. Set your item level, your required level, change them to be stackable to whatever amount you like. Flasks on my server are stackable to 200. And then we're going to change the spell ID to the one that we chose for the effect. That's it. Now in order to make a new display entry for this flask so that the item appears the same as our custom icon, we're going to have to actually create a new entry in itemdisplayinfo.dbc. You open up your server files and you open up the item display info DBC with WDBX editor. We're just going to look for the Flask of Supreme Power display ID. So 19547. Copy line. After right clicking, go all the way to the bottom. Create a new entry if your values are screwed up because too high of values are not readable on the database. So let's just do 81034. Paste the line. We're going to change this to 81034 as well. And then we're going to look for the icon name. So if we go back into Spell Editor, we go back into icons. If you hover over the icon, you'll get the icon name. So in this case, it's Inventory Alchemy 70 Flask 03 Red. Double check to make sure you have the right name. I don't, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that's correct. All you're concerned about is everything after the dash, but before the .blp. Go ahead and hit save. Exit out of that one. And then we're going to go into skilllineability.dbc. This is the skill line that we've worked with before, both when I was creating new class spells and modifying existing profession spells. So again, we're just going to look for Flask of Supreme Power and duplicate that row. Just make sure it's the create item spell. We're just using Flask of Supreme Power over and over again just for some consistency. And of course, it just makes our life easier overall. So 17637. Go ahead and copy this line and paste it at the bottom again. Then of course we're going to change this number to the spell ID of our create item spell. This skill line here indicates the profession, the spell. These are if you want to exclude any races or classes. Acquire method here doesn't matter so much. This here is when the flask turns gray, and this is when it turns green. Regarding profession skill ups. Go ahead and hit save, and exit out of that. Now we get to test everything together, so go ahead and do server shutdown 1. Close out of your client, open up Lattice MPQ editor, open up your patch with your DB files client. If you don't have one or know where it's at, you can create a new one. Just make sure that it's the last patch you have. So patch 9 or patch Z are good to make sure that they don't ever get overwritten by other patches. Open this DB files client folder, grab our skill line ability DBC, as well as our item display info DBC, and put them into Lattice MPQ editor. Go to our export folder for spell editor, put the spell DBC also into Lattice MPQ editor, drag it into our server folder, and the server folder is this DBC folder. It's the one with your M maps, V maps, data, camera, etc. Just click on DBC and it'll be all here. Close out of Lattice MPQ editor, start up your server again, start up your client. Now we're going to learn the spell for actually crafting this flask. You do that by doing the command .learn followed by this ID. Want to make sure, of course, that you have alchemy already. And it looks like it says I've learned how to create a new item, Flask of Battle Prowess. It looks like the flask showed up. I'm not sure why, but Flask of Supreme Power showed up, which is not what we wanted. So I'm going to go ahead and debug, and sometimes it's good to make mistakes on videos. Some of you will run across the same thing. So Flask of Battle Prowess, go into effects, and it looks like I still have it set to the Flask of Supreme Power ID. So go ahead and change that to 8, hit save, export, and import all over again. Just for good measure, I'm going to go ahead and unlearn this spell before I do all the shutting down. One thing I forgot to mention, because I'm used to using a modified client where I don't need to do this step, is it's a good idea to also open up item.dbc and update this so that it actually shows up as more than just a red question mark in your server. And to do that, you just go to Tools, Wrath Item Import, Connect, choose your database, which is Acore World or wherever your item template is. Go down to item template, choose your server core. In this case, we're just going to use Trinity because it's the same tables. Hit load. And there you have it. It's all done. Hit save. Put this in your DB files client as well. And just a reminder, this is separate from the item display info DBC. All right, let's try that again, shall we? So learn 817637. Back into alchemy, and this time we are successful. Go ahead and hit add item. We're just wanting to make sure that the stats actually work. Base stats looks like I have 1000 attack power roughly. And it looks like it gave me exactly 100 attack power. Okay, so next you have a couple of other options. In terms of acquisition, you could either put it on an NPC trainer, you could put it on a vendor, or you could put it in some sort of loot table for a boss or a chest or something. In my case, I'm just going to go ahead and do this for a boss. But don't worry, I'll also show you how to put it on an NPC and a vendor. So this time we're looking for recipe, Flask of Supreme Power. If it doesn't exist, you can use any other recipe. In fact, let's just go ahead and do that. Duplicate row with keys, create a new entry number, rename this Flask of Battle Prowess. You change the display ID if you really wanted to, but I'm not going to, I'm okay. Item level I'm going to change to 60. Required skill is alchemy 171. Required skill rank I'm going to put at 300. And then we're going to go over to spell ID 1. This is actually the learning spell, and you need this on all recipes. This right here is the spell ID we need for our crafted spell, so 817637. Spell trigger 6 just means that it's learned through crafting. It basically tells this spell ID 1 to do its job. Don't forget to modify your buy and sell prices as well if you're going to put this on a vendor. It also is a good idea to update item DBC again, just in case you need to and you don't have a modified client. I'm going to unlearn the spell, just to make sure that the recipe works. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the item to my character. Right click it to make sure we learn the spell. And it looks like we are successful. If you want, you can also just test crafting it out. And of course I need an alchemy lab, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, and we're at our alchemy lab. And it looks like we are able to craft that, so that's good. Let's just make sure that we craft the actual item. And it looks like we definitely crafted it, so that's a good thing. One other thing that we have to change is the spell group. So, for example, for right now, the flask we created doesn't actually have the proper flags. So you can actually use this flask with other flasks. To learn more about the spell group table in your database, you can actually go to Azerothcore or whatever core you're working with and just read the information here. In our particular case, we're just going to go ahead and look up the entry for Flask of Supreme Power again. It looks like it has a special flag of 3, which probably means for flasks. Duplicate row with keys, input the new number for a new flask, and that should now prevent players from stacking flasks. Alright, and now it's time to go ahead and put this on a loot table. I'm going to go ahead and choose Houndmaster Grebmar in Blackrock Depths. So I want to look up his NPC ID. Look up creature Houndmaster Grebmar. So 8319. It's likely that his loot ID also matches his NPC ID, but it's a good idea to double check. It's not true for all creatures. Sea Mangos, it feels like they never matched their loot IDs with the creature IDs. So we found our creature entry, and we're just going over to the column that says loot ID, which it is the exact same ID. So creature loot template. And again, this would be applicable for item object template or item template, whatever. Item loot template, spell loot template, it's all the same process. So creature loot template. You may have to hit this show all button at the top. And these are the loot entries for this particular boss. This column here is the item. If there's a number here, it means that it's part of a larger group of items. This here is the chance. You want to make sure that these don't ever add up to more than 100% per group ID. This is if a quest is required or not. And the group ID is really important, so you want to make sure that no group is more than 100%. You want to make sure that you have unique group IDs. And then this is the minimum count and maximum count, so if you want more than one recipe to drop, you would change that. Just go ahead and copy any one of these, which is 847507. I'm going to go ahead and change this to a separate group ID, and I'm going to make the drop chance 15%. It's also a good idea to leave a comment just so you remember what this row is. And honestly, that's pretty much it. Like I said though, if you wanted to add it to an NPC trainer, you would just go to the NPC trainer DB, your world database, and then you would look for an existing entry for a spell. In this case, Flask of Supreme Power is not learned from trainer, so we'd have to find a similar spell. This ID here is the trainer ID. Some of these are universal. So we're just going to go ahead and go with Elixir of Greater Agility and make sure that it's the create item. So 11467. Go ahead and copy this row, duplicate it with keys, Put in your new spell ID, which is 817628. Modify the money amount here and the required skill rank here, which would be 300. Required level, required spell. And these required levels are mostly just for class trainers. But that's pretty much it, and then it should appear on trainers. The other option you have, of course, is to add it to a vendor. We're just going to take the item entry for the recipe, which is 847507, and use the command npc add item, which might vary for you depending on what core you're on, followed by the item ID, and it now shows up on the vendor. Of course, you'll want to add a price if you want to. The other thing too is if you wanted to make this a limited item, like these ones here, where only one shows up at a time or two for a certain duration, you go into your NPC vendor table, find the NPC ID of this person, so NPC info command, look for that information, which in this case is 4226. We're going to find our item here. Don't worry about slots so much unless you want it to be in a specific order, then you have to change every slot. This is the max count, so if it shows up for a short duration, and this is the increments in which they show up in milliseconds. You can add an extended cost, but I won't go over that today. I'll go over that in another video, and that's pretty much it. So I know you might have questions or run into issues, so feel free to leave a comment down below. I'm also taking request videos for certain topics as well. So go ahead and leave a comment down below for that as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please hit the like button, share it, and don't forget to subscribe for more content, and I will see you guys on the other side of Azeroth.